Rio de Janeiro
with a big man.
G'day mates, this is a bit Imam and it's great to be back. Welcome to Freo de Janeiro. You'll remember me from Road to Rio building up to the Olympics. Well, that experience has had such an impression that this series is called Freo de Janeiro to pay homage to my two favourite cities, Fremantle in Western Australia and Rio in Brazil. In keeping with the name, you'll hear from a fascinating mix of guests from a range of walks of life, people that have a story that needs to be told. What is so great about the audio medium is how much a voice can tell you and how you can connect with someone's story without even being in their physical presence. We are going to harness this. So wherever you are absorbing these stories in the great wide world of ours, I hope it brings you enjoyment and value. And of course, a pretty healthy dose of laughs along the ride. First up, in keeping with the theme, we've got a guest from Rio named Jody King. He's an Englishman that moved there. And yeah, that all sounds pretty normal until I tell you that he moved to Brazil's largest favela called Rocinha. Now, favelas are densely populated, sprawling communities brimming with life. Rocinha is home to about 70,000 people in a small space along a steep hill with incredible views. Approximately 6% of Brazil's population live across 1,000 favelas around the nation. Jody tells us his journey to Rocinha and how he is working to make a difference there with his school and tours. It's an incredible and raw insight into life in a favela. I've read a quote somewhere that you haven't lived until you've been to Brazil, and if you get the opportunity, I hope you are compelled through this conversation to potentially visit a community like this and see the life that it contains. I hope you enjoy this one. Jody, welcome to Freo de Janeiro. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. How are you going?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into your story, I just want to start off with how we met. And we met at the Olympic Games in 2016 in Rio on Copacabana Beach. And we've of stayed in, I've been able to follow your story since, and I thought it would be absolutely brilliant to get you on. So I'm really excited and can't wait to hear what you have to say about your life, and I think it's really interesting.
Sure, awesome.
Let's start from the very beginning. I mean, where did you grow up and what was it like?
I grew up in the southwest of England, a small little coastal town called Bude. Very small little town. It was very nice there in the summer. There's beaches, but the summer never really lasts there very long. So I got fed up of life there pretty quickly. Always wanted to live somewhere a little bit warmer. But yeah, that's where I grew up. Little corner of England.
And how much travel did you do early on in your life?
Travel? I only really started travelling when I was about 25, and actually Australia was the first place I went to. I travelled up and down the east coast of Australia for 6 weeks after a relationship went south in England. I wanted to kind of get as far away from the problems in England as possible. So I went to Australia for 6 weeks and loved it and kind of got the travel bug. And then I went to Italy a short time afterwards. And since then, since I've come to Brazil in the last 5 years, I've managed to do quite a bit of traveling, actually. A little bit in South America, India. I went to Tokyo. And I travelled quite a lot around Europe last year as well, actually. Whilst I was doing a fundraising event in Europe, I got to see quite a lot of Europe, which was nice. So, yeah, I'd like to travel more, but it's expensive. So, but I've certainly got the bug, and I'd like to do it a lot more for sure.
Amen to that. And back in Australia, what parts of the East Coast did you get to take in?
Yeah, that's right. I was in Sydney, Brisbane, Cairns, Airlie Beach, Noosa, Byron Bay, Surfers Paradise, Newcastle. Where else? I took a road trip up to Cape Tribulation from Cairns. Went around the Daintree Rainforest and up there. Yeah, I loved it. I really loved going up and down the east coast of Australia. That was my first travel trip, and Australia is always a good first one because there's no language barrier. It's well set up for travel up and down there. The hostels are a great standard. I really enjoyed it. I liked Australia a lot.
And just like Brazil, it's a huge country. So for a person like me that lives in Perth, it's 5 hours from Melbourne, Sydney, sort of like, Sao Paulo to
That's right,
Fortaleza.
yeah.
It's like 5 hours as well. So vast distances.
That's right, yeah. I'd like to get back and see some of the West Coast at some point. I mean, like I mentioned to you, my brother lives there. I'd love to get out there at some point and see a little bit more. Darwin's another place that interests me. Perhaps I'll get back over there at some point for sure.
And how many siblings do you have, going back to growing up in England? What was your family life there?
So I've got one brother and one sister. They're both older. So I'm the baby. And we're all living in the far-flung corners of the planet. My brother's in Australia. I'm in Brazil, of course, and my sister lives in the north of Canada. So, my parents in England still, their three kids are, the four of us, we're in 4 different continents.
Well, at least they've got a place to stay everywhere they go, pretty much.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they've got some great holiday destinations, that's for sure.
And how you got to Brazil is a very fascinating story. I've been able to, in the research for this, find out and listen to some of the podcasts or other interviews you've done, not podcasts, but other interviews, and I understand you had a dream.
That's right. It did stem from a dream. At the time, I was depressed in England. Actually, I was heartbroken. Like I mentioned, when I went to Australia, I was screwed over by an ex-fiance. I was with this girl for, I think, 7 or 8 years in England, and we were engaged. We were planning a wedding together. We were trying to have a baby together, but she cheated on me. Got pregnant with another guy and ran off with this other guy. So I was really heartbroken, and I got depressed in England and stayed depressed for like a good couple of years in England, and my life was really just going nowhere. I was in like this hole, and it was whilst I was very depressed that I had the dream actually, and all I could remember from the dream was overlooking a beach. A beautiful beach, white sand, palm trees, blue sea, very beautiful beach. Looking down on it, and when I woke up, I'd had this good feeling about the dream, like it, and I hadn't felt it for a long time, like feeling good inside, because I'd been depressed. It felt really good, but there was a word stuck in my head, which was strange because I've never had that having woken up. A word that I'd never heard of before. The word was Ipanema, and it kept repeating in my head over and over for a good couple of hours. And I what is Ipanema? What does this mean? And eventually, I went onto the internet, put in Ipanema in Google, and thought, what is this? And then saw, of course, what Ipanema was. This neighborhood of Rio, beautiful with a beach, of course, as well. And I thought, wow, this place looks incredible. So I'd done a bit of research into Ipanema and Rio, and then I thought to myself, this is it. I need to go here. I can be happy again. If I go here, I'll be happy. And so I spent 3 months then after the dream researching Rio, and I knew that I was going to like it in Rio. I knew it was my kind of place. 3 months after the dream, I took a one-way flight to Rio and haven't looked back since.
And it's interesting that it's another 7-letter word, not Ipanema, but Rocinha, which is where you ended up.
That's right, yeah.
Very close, as we see in Brazil, where the haves and the have-nots are located basically within touching distance of each other. What was your perception of Brazil heading there for the first time? Do you remember that?
I just remember just being very excited. I knew that it was what I needed. I needed to get out of England to kind of make a fresh start, get away from the source of the pain. And I just remember just being very excited. I didn't know anyone in Rio. I didn't speak the language. I didn't have a job lined up, nothing. And the fact that I had to find all this new thing, learn a new language, make new friends, find a new job, find a place to stay. I just remember being very excited by it. I didn't feel daunted by it at all. It was just excitement. I really knew that I was making the right decision. It seemed like a crazy decision, but I knew that it was the right one. And as soon as I stepped off the plane, I remember that the depression left me instantly. As soon as I got in Rio, I almost didn't really care and think about what I'd just been through for the last 2 years. I just suddenly became happy in Rio, and lived a much more positive life. So, yeah, I just remember, the trip over, just being very excited and just looking forward to this new start in Brazil.
And how did you make your way in those first few days? What were your connections there, and who helped you out? And then how did you end up making it to Rocinha for the first time?
Okay, so my plan was to come to Rio and teach English, because realistically I thought that was the only way that I could earn money in a city where I don't speak the language. So I got qualified to teach English as a foreign language before I came over. And the plan was to stay in some cheap hostels and look for teaching English work, because I didn't actually come with that much money, actually. So I had to knuckle down quickly. I didn't have time to party or anything like that. I wanted to try and find work quickly and get settled. So I was staying the plan was to stay in cheap hostels until I got a job. And on my 6th day in Rio, I saw a hostel at the top of Vidigal Favela, with the most amazing view over Leblon and Ipanema Beach, which is a coincidence, actually, because maybe the dream was a premonition, because I ended up living at this hostel, and the view was actually looking down over Ipanema Beach, a little bit similar to the dream. So that was my first taste of life in a favela, because I went to this hostel, and I ended up liking it so much in the hostel that I then booked to stay long-term there, and the owner of the hostel actually offered me a job. And I didn't have any work at that time, so I thought, sure, I'll do it. I need something. So I ended up working in the hostel and actually became manager of the place, and stayed there for a year. So that got me into the favelas. And it was just because I was offered a job there, really. I really liked the place. I liked the favela. The view was absolutely stunning. Got on very well with the owner, who is from Austria. Ended up DJing at some of the parties up there, because they also function as a bar and nightclub. So that really helped me find my feet in Rio, and in the favelas, in fact. And I always had this connection with Rocinha, because Rocinha is the other side of the mountain from Vidigal. They're quite close to each other. And I used to come into Rocinha a lot to volunteer at a DJ school in Rocinha. And then when I was managing the hostel, I would take guests of the hostel from Vidigal into Rocinha for tours and shopping and food, because the shops and the restaurants are fantastic in Rocinha. So I used to come to Rocinha a lot, always had the connection, and then having spent a year in Vidigal Favela, a tour guide operator then offered me a job being a tour guide in Rocinha just before the World Cup started. So that's why I came to Rocinha then, because I was then offered a job as being a tour guide, and it sounded great being a tour guide. I was just starting to get a little bit bored of living in a hostel as well. I mean, it was a great location. It was a great place to find my feet, but I think you can only really live in a hostel for a certain amount of time before it gets a bit too much, So the job offer of a tour guide came really at the right time, and then I came to Rocinha to live and be a tour guide just before the World Cup started, June 2014. Been here ever since.
And to be a tour guide, you would need to know quite a bit about the community and field all the questions that the tourists would have. Yeah. How did you gather your knowledge, and which sort of people were you connecting with in the communities to increase your knowledge bank?
So I already know a few things of general life in a favela, because I've been living in Vidigal, of course. But when I started becoming a tour guide in Rocinha, I went on 7 or 8 tours with the boss of this company, the tour company. I went on tours with him, took a notepad and pen, and was just basically writing down everything he was saying, all the little statistics and bits of information to the tourists, just making a note of it and then looking over the notes, memorizing it. So that's how I got started. But I mean, learning all the time still, of course. The longer I've been a tour guide, talking to people in the community about how their life was in the past. I'm always picking up new things the longer I live here. I remember my first year being a tour guide, I couldn't always answer every question. Maybe I could only answer 70, 80% of the questions. But now I can certainly answer 100% of the questions because, I've heard so much about life in the favela before I moved here, what it used to be like in the past. So it's a constant learning curve, really, because always hearing things about how the locals feel about living here and their life, their work. So yeah, it's a constant learning curve, really. But I certainly know a lot now. That's for sure.
And you would have learned that through the language barrier. And I'm really interested in how people acquire languages. I'm very passionate about languages myself, learning Portuguese over the last few years, and then now starting a bit of Russian. But how did you go about learning Portuguese and tackling that challenge?
Yeah, so it was a challenge that really appealed to me because I wanted to learn a new language. That was another one of the attractions to coming to Rio because I knew I would have to learn a new language. I wanted that challenge. So it's been difficult. It's not an easy language to learn. And, I didn't have any other second language to kind of go off because I know that the first second language anyone learns is always the hardest. And unfortunately, I didn't do a second language in school. I chose French, but I was actually kicked out of it. I didn't pay attention. Now I wish I'd chosen Spanish and paid attention. But so it's been a challenge. When I started managing the hostel in Vidigal, I did take a 4-week language course to get the basics of Portuguese. The rest of it I've just picked up as I've gone along on the street, just talking to people. Messaging it has been a good way of writing and learning as well. I was picking up pretty slowly in the beginning. I was getting frustrated with myself at not being able to say everything that I wanted to be able to in Portuguese. It was quite a slow process, but what's really helped me actually, really in the last 2 years now, is having a Brazilian girlfriend that doesn't speak English. We've been together 2 years, and that's really accelerated my Portuguese in the last couple of years, actually. So I'm almost fluent now, I'd like to think. It's certainly getting there. Yeah, I can always say what I need to say and understand what's being said. But it was definitely a challenge, but certainly a challenge that I've enjoyed.
Well, love has no language, so... Well, the language of love is the universal language itself, so that's a great one. And have you been able to travel around South America and utilize Spanish? Because it seems like Portuguese to Spanish is a really easy step.
Yes. So I spent 3 months in Colombia, actually, about 2 or 3 years ago. And I was finding that I was picking up Spanish very quickly in the 3 months in Colombia. Because of the Portuguese that I know, I was picking it up very quickly. So I've decided that once I'm 100% fluent in Portuguese, I will definitely learn Spanish because, it's more, Spanish is used much more globally than Portuguese. It's a very useful language to speak, especially in South America. So yeah, it's certainly much easier for me now to learn Spanish than it was learning Portuguese, that's for sure. Learn it much quicker.
I keep getting fascinated by your travels, but I must ask, where in Colombia did you go? Because I'm a big fan of that country too.
Okay, yes, beautiful, isn't it? I'd done a couple of work-away jobs there, actually. So I was working in a hostel in Medellin for 5 weeks. So I stayed in Medellin for quite a long time, for 5 weeks. And then I I spent some time in Santa Marta, Cartagena, Bogota. I also got a workaway job in a quite a small place at the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range called Valle du Par.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I've
saw a
heard
lot
of that.
places. I never went to Cali though, and I never went to that place. You know, the river of the different coloured river.
Mm.
I can't remember what it's called. There's a river in Colombia that has algae of different colours. So
Fascinating.
there's a couple of spots that I didn't actually make it to still, but you know, I really got to know Medellin especially very well. Also spent quite a long time in Santa Marta, which was nice. But yeah, I absolutely love Colombia. You know, very similar to Brazil in a way that, you know, very friendly people, good food, good fruits, beautiful weather, hot, amazing rainforest and greenery and animals. So yeah, I really liked it there a lot. It's a very nice country.
And jumping around back to the favela, you know, the common misconception is how dangerous it is and this notorious reputation. When someone asks you, I'm sure you get questioned about it quite a lot, but what is your go-to sort of statement to represent the favelas and your experience there?
Sure, yeah. Everyone always thinks that the favelas are very, very dangerous, which is not true. Because, and I always say this to people, especially tourists that are coming on a tour with me straight away, because some of them might feel a little bit uneasy, like they're going to be coming into a dangerous place. So I've always got to kind of reassure them and say, look, it's not actually that dangerous. You know, if it was so dangerous, for a start, I wouldn't live here. I choose to live here. If it was so dangerous, I would not live here. And I do genuinely feel more safer in the favela than I do in Copacabana, Ipanema, you know, these touristy areas of Rio, because in the favela, crimes like robbery and assault do not happen in the favela. The criminals live here, absolutely, the thieves live here, but they do not commit these crimes in the favela. There's a very strict code. You know, if they want to rob someone, they're specifically told, go to Copacabana, go to Ipanema, rob the tourists, rob the wealthy people down there, which makes sense because that's where the money is. But in the favela, you know, it's such a strong community where people look out for one another so much that they won't allow anything like this to happen. And if someone's caught robbing someone in the favela, the gang will chop their hand off and they'll be kicked out of the community. So, you know, the punishment, if you break one of the rules, is pretty severe. And if you do something bad enough, you'll be killed for it. So nobody dares break the rules here. So they go down to the wealthier areas to commit the petty crimes like robbery. So it's safer than people think. Of course, there are gangs here, and there is shootings that do occur here sometimes. So this is the danger. But saying that, the shootings always happen in certain areas of the favela. You know, Rocinha is so big. There's 26 subdivisions of Rocinha, 26 areas. 5 of these 26 areas are conflict areas, just 5. You know, whenever there's shootings between gang and police, it's always in these 5 areas. So I always reassure the tourists, look, I'm not going to take you to these 5 areas. We don't go there. So if there's shooting, if you hear gunshots, don't worry. It's not going to be near us. It's going to be over on the edges, up over there, and show them where it is, and it's not near us. So, you know, thankfully, where I've lived in Rocinha as well, you know, my house has never been in an area where I've had a risk of a bullet coming in through my wall of my house, you know, a stray bullet. Unfortunately, you know, I feel very sorry for the people that live in these areas of the favela where there is conflict, because that is dangerous then for them, of course. They're living in a dangerous area where the conflict is, and they have the risk of a stray bullet coming into their house. So there are areas that I would consider dangerous, that I wouldn't want to live in, that's for sure, where these conflict areas, these 5 areas, you know, there's no way I would live there. But, you know, the 60-70% of the favela, there's not this risk, and it's actually pretty peaceful. You know, it's peaceful 99% of the time here. The shootings, they occur maybe once or twice a week, but it's literally normally 5 or 10 minutes, and then it finishes, and it's really strange because, you know, something as serious as people trying to shoot each other, it's strange how life continues like normal, even when it's going on, because the people in the area that it's not happening, although you can hear it, they continue like normal because they know they're not at risk. It's just a kind of background noise, which seems very strange to someone like me or you from England and Australia, where, you know, you kind of just get used to hearing gunshots, and if it's not in your area, you just continue like normal, and everything stays normal, you know, which is quite strange, I guess.
It's interesting that you said people carry on, because, I mean, there's been people that have, surely that you know, have been caught in crossfire. I mean, has there been any instances of people that are close to you that have been harmed or injured or killed?
Yes, I've had 2 of my friends been shot. One was took a stray bullet in the shoulder. Quite a young guy who was working on the vans, the public vans that do a circular around the mountain, you know, from Rocinha to Leblon to Vidigal. He worked on these. He was always very friendly with me. Always spoke to him a lot on the vans, and he took a stray bullet in the shoulder once and was in hospital. Then another guy who I was good friends with, and actually he's my neighbour here in where I live at the top of Rocinha. He's a motor taxi driver, and he didn't stop at a police check. The police were checking the motor taxis' licenses. I think they were checking their documents, and he didn't stop for whatever reason, whether he was listening to music, didn't see them, or whatever. But he didn't stop, and the police opened fire on him, shot him, and then run him over in a police car, and he was very badly injured. He's actually had one of his feet amputated, and he took a couple of bullets to the body. Thankfully, he survived, and you know, he's recovering. But you know, that was quite shocking because I was quite close to him. You know, so unfortunately, it can be a common occurrence in the favelas. You know, the police shoot first and ask questions later, you know, and they don't really care about who their bullets are hitting. You know, they have very little regard for the people that live in the favelas, which is very sad. So the police are feared more than the gang are, really. They're not liked here at all. People tend to have more trust in the gang than they do with the police. Because actually the gang are a better police than the police are, because the gang have always been a police here. You know, the rules that I said before about, you know, that people not committing crimes in the favela, these are rules put in by the gang because the gang don't want crime happening in their place. They want peace. Because if someone's coming here getting robbed, getting assaulted, people aren't going to come and buy the drugs from the gang. So the gang have got their business to protect. So they do a better job than the police, actually. And because they're from the community, they genuinely care about the community and the good of the community, whereas the police are not from here. So they don't really care about, you know, the people or the place. So actually the gang are more respected than the police are.
Mm. And in terms of the peaceful times, how does the community sort of organise themselves with the things that in our countries like Australia and England that we take for granted, electricity, water, your bins getting taken? How is that all organised in a community like Rocinha?
Well, things like these services like water, electricity, sewerage, they were put in by the community themselves. There was main electric wires on the main road going through the middle, and then people would steal from the main road, I think we call it hooking in English, where you get your illegal feed, run it to your property down these alleyways here. And it's the same with the water in the past. And sewage, these sewage systems, they built themselves. And actually the gang paid for a lot of some of this infrastructure, especially the sewage systems. Money that they made in the past from drug trafficking, they put into building a lot of the sewage systems and the steps in the alleyways. So they've helped a little bit in the past. yeah, the community have done it themselves, which is what's so amazing about favelas, because they've built a city within a city here. Rocinha really is like a city. I mean, it's got everything you can possibly think of here. There's over 6,000 businesses, internet. Well, everyone's got water and electricity. So everyone's got sewage system, So and they've done it themselves, which I think is really incredible. Since the pacification in the favela, which came in November 2011 in Rocinha, the pacification is where the government have sent in the military police to patrol the favelas. The idea was to get rid of the gangs and put military police in their place. Didn't work so well. The gangs are still here, but with that, the government are more active in the favela. So things like water, electricity, sewerage, trash collection, these are now government responsibilities now. So the gang have taken more of a back seat, and the government are now responsible for the upkeep of the services in the favela. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely.
I couldn't remember what the question was. But
yeah, well, it's so much. It is such a broad area when you're talking about government services, and it is fascinating how Rocinha has done it so incredibly. So many people living in close
they've
quarters.
done it all themselves, which is really amazing because, a lot of people from favelas are ashamed to be from a favela, which I think is really sad. I think that people from favelas should be proud to be from a favela because what they've achieved is absolutely incredible. You take away government help from a town where we're from, the town won't survive. They will fall apart. But here, they've really built a self-sustaining community, which I think is really incredible. I think people from favela should be proud, not ashamed.
Has that shifted at all? Have you seen any change in that? Like, I've heard of, there's a lot more hostels and more tourists coming into favelas starting to see and understand it. Is it something that people are becoming more proud of, or is it going backwards?
To be honest, I don't think there's much of a change, really. Of course, during the World Cup and the Olympics, there was a kind of a spike of hostels being built and more tourism coming here. But since the Olympics has finished, that's dropped again now. A lot of the hostels have closed, and that's not happening so much. I think the tours do help, for sure, because we're spreading the good. We're showing the good side of the favela, which not a lot of people know. When people who have never been here before think of favela, they only really think negative things, violence, crime. So on the tours, they're learning all these positive things about life in a favela, how hardworking the people are, how amazing the food is here, how many businesses are here, the infrastructure, the internet. They learn all these things that they don't know. So the tours help create a more positive outlook on the favelas for the outside world, which definitely helps. But I know that people are still ashamed to be from a favela, but I think, this is down to Brazilian government and wealthy Brazilians, who will always think very negatively of favelas and turn a blind eye to what's happening there, or, the wealthy Brazilians don't help, and the media doesn't help here, and the government certainly doesn't help. Unfortunately, so I always think that the work that I'm doing and the other tour guides here, we're really up against it, trying to spread the good word of the favela, because there's so much negative being put out on the TVs every single day about the favelas by the media and stuff. So it's hard, but the people that come on the tours, they really do see the favela for what it is for the day. They always really, really enjoy it. They always love the place, and a lot of them come back or even stay after the tour because it is a very lovable place and a very misunderstood place, which is why the tours are so important, actually,
I do love the Instagram photos you put on with each of the tour the tourists that come out on your tour, and you have
That's
Rocinha in the
right.
background. You're standing on the bridge, and I sort of had to rub my eyes a few months ago when I saw that some of the famous footballers from the AFL, Stephen Cornelio and John Padden, were
That's
on one of
right.
your tours.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realise that they were famous or semi-famous at the time. They told me that they played football, but I didn't really think too much of it, and it was only after the tour that they followed Favela Phoenix on Instagram. So I followed them back and looked on their profile and realised that these guys had thousands and thousands of followers. And I realised then that they were actually pretty big footballers, which was great for Favela Phoenix, for the tour company, because of course they were posting photos on the tour on their social media, which of course thousands and thousands of people would have seen. So I remember I did have a couple of tourists come to me afterwards saying, hey, we saw these guys come on a tour. They loved it, so we're coming on the tour. So yeah, I'm glad that they came, because they certainly helped my project a little bit and got me a few more tourists.
And I'm really interested in where you stay in particular. Have you always lived in the same dwelling in Rocinha, or have you moved around? Or what's it like being? You said you're at the top. What's that like?
I've moved around. I think I've lived in 4 different places, but I've always been at the top. In fact, it's the same in Vidgal Favela. I was always at the top of there. I always seem to be at the top of the favelas. But so when I first came to Rocinha, I stayed with a friend who ran a guest house, and I stayed in his guest house for a couple of weeks until I found an apartment which was a house share. And I went into the house share again. That was always going to be temporary until I found my own place. But I wanted to take my time on finding my own place until I found the right place for me that I knew that I'd be happy to stay in for a very long time. So I ended up staying in the house share for about 2 or 3 months, and then I found a beautiful 2-bedroom place at the top again that I then lived in for 2.5 years. Great place, nice big terrace with a nice, fantastic view over the favela. And I only moved from there actually to where I am now because my school had to change locations, because the location my school was in was being turned into a medical centre, so I had to find a new place for my school. So I was then offered a building by a German guy who owns this beautiful big building at the highest part of Rocinha you can go to, called Laborio. Beautiful building, and he said, look, I'm not living there. If you want your project there, you can have your project there, and you can rent my apartment. The apartment's empty. Rent the apartment, and you can have your school underneath. So I thought, it's fantastic, because I'm living in the same building as my school now, which makes it so much easier to manage. So that's why I'm where I am now. So I've been here now for about 7 months.
And how does one purchase property in Rocinha?
It's actually pretty easy to purchase property. It's the same as anywhere now, because since the pacification in the favela, the best thing about the pacification is that the people legally own their homes here now. So everyone has the deeds to their properties. So it's just like anywhere else in the world. You go through all the right paperwork to buy a place. And there's always a lot of places for sale and to rent here. People coming and going. There's always a lot of movement, just like any other neighborhood. Some people change favelas a lot. You won't get many people leaving a favela and going to a nice neighborhood, but they certainly move favelas depending on their work, their jobs or something. So houses become available quite a lot here, actually, to rent and buy. And you go through the same process as you would anywhere else.
And you said that you lived on the top. I'm just interested in accessibility because of some of my own experiences going to a couple of different favelas within Rio de Janeiro, and a couple of times when I've taken a taxi to the bottom, the taxi driver would not want to go to the top because of the amount of steepness it was, and some of them just not willing to ruin their cars on the cobblestone. So you have to take the motor taxi. So how accessible is your place going up to the top?
It's quite accessible, actually. You can drive a car here, which is rare. It's very rare to be able to drive a car to your place because most of it is alleyways, and you can only get so near with a motorbike taxi. But my place is pretty accessible, actually. You can get here by car. I don't use a car, of course. It's there's not much parking, and a car's too expensive for me. So I use the motor taxis everywhere, and they're fantastic. You know, they're good drivers. They get you up and down pretty quickly. The motor taxi will bring me like right outside my front door. So I always tend to walk down the favela when I need to get down, but I'll always take a motorbike taxi back up. There's no way I'm walking all the way up the favela. It's a very difficult walk.
Definitely a good way to get the strong legs. But I wanted to talk about your school and Favela Phoenix. How much does it mean to you, and how did you conceive that idea and project?
Well, I got the idea for the school when I went back to England for Christmas 2014 it was, and then that's right. Until January 2015, I was in my hometown, and it was one of my best friends actually in my hometown that gave me the idea. He said, "Look, why don't you start a project in the favela? Because if you do, I will sponsor you each month. I'll give you a little bit of money each month to run a project." And he made me realize that it would be quite easy to find some sponsorships if I had a project there. And I thought it was a great idea. So I came back to Rio in January 2015, planned the school, and it took 9 months to open. And initially, I remember I wanted to do a trade school because I used to work in construction in England. So it was something that I knew a bit about. But I realized that it would be too much hard work and too much money, too expensive to start a trade school, and very difficult to find teachers to teach it, Brazilians to teach different trades. So the next obvious thing was an English school. It's very easy to set up. It's very easy to find teachers, travelers that want to volunteer and teach. And it's important, it's something that is very needed in Rio. So it took 9 months to find a location, find equipment, materials, find a teacher, find some students, and get it running. So it opened in September 2015, just with 16 students to begin with, one class a day. And it's slowly been growing over the last two and a half years now. 2.5 years. And now we have over 100 students in 3 classes a day, children and adults. It's very popular in the community. Each new term we have, one term lasts 4 months, and every time a new term begins, it's always very full, the classes, especially the beginner classes in particular, very, very full, because people want to learn it, The people here have a good drive and determination. They don't get a lot of opportunities of education. The public school system here is not good, so they're not learning languages in the public school. They don't learn geography. They don't learn history in the public schools. They're missing a lot of key subjects. So any extra education that you can provide these people, they will snap it with both hands. They will take it because they know they need the opportunities to succeed. And the people here want to better their lives. They want to work and get better jobs and become successful. So. Yeah, my school is very popular. They want to learn English.
Are there any particular success stories that you've seen over the last few years that really stick out to you?
There's been a couple. There was one girl there's been a lot of people actually that got jobs because they've learned English in my school. There was one girl that got a promotion. She already had a job, but she wanted this promotion. But to get the promotion, she had to speak English. She came to Favela Phoenix, learned English, and got the promotion, and is now earning twice as much money.
That's awesome.
So yeah, there's I know of a lot of people that have gotten jobs because they've learned English as well. It really is working for people. Which is fantastic to see. Really pleasing for me to see this.
And how are you sort of getting Favela Phoenix to take the next step now? I hear that there's some really fancy sort of fundraising. I just heard somewhere that it was Amazon kayaking. Is that true? And
Oh,
what
yeah,
other
that's right.
things are you
Yeah,
doing?
that's not happening anymore, actually. I planned on kayaking on the Amazon. I think I was planning on doing it next year. No, I was planning on doing it this year. But actually, I realized that I couldn't afford it because we would have had to have paid for a guide, and this trip would have been very, very expensive, and I personally wouldn't have been able to afford it. But it's certainly something that I plan on doing in the future. You know, I plan on doing some fundraising events. But, you know, anything like that is quite costly. And, you know, I don't earn a lot of money, so I've got to do something within my budget. What I'll probably do this year is a Spartan race, something that's happening in Rio. It's 100 reais to enter. It's a crazy race with a lot of obstacles, and I quite like this kind of thing. So I've done this before to raise money, and I'll probably do this again this year. Last year I cycled the River Danube through Europe, from Passau in Germany, through Austria, through Slovakia, and ended in Hungary, in Budapest. With a few friends I'd done that with, and that was fantastic. That raised a lot of money for the project. You know, as there's a team of us, we're all reaching out to our contacts, different people, and collectively it raised a really fantastic sum of money for the school. But of course, I can't do a big trip like this all the time. I can only work within my budget. But the kayaking on the Amazon is certainly something that I will do in the future. For sure. These fundraising events, you know, it's fun for me because I get to travel, I get to keep fit. I like keeping fit, you know, cycling, kayaking. It's something that I enjoy doing, and it's hugely beneficial to my project. So it's really, they're big win-win situations. And I want to try and do one every year, for sure.
And your team at Favela Phoenix, where do they hail from? Where do they come from around the world to help the people living in Rocinha?
So we've got two long-term teachers right now. They're both girls. One's from Switzerland and one's from Sweden. They've both been English teachers for a long time. They've got a lot of experience, and they're living here as well. They're both living in Rocinha. They love it here, and we had another teacher from Switzerland in the past, in fact. And we've used a lot of volunteers as well in the past, you know, from really all over the world, from Europe, from Asia. We've had volunteers from Australia, North America. They're really from everywhere. But our team right now is these two girls from Switzerland and Sweden are teaching the classes now. My dad helps a lot as well, actually, from England, because it's a UK-based charity. So our bank account is based in England. So my dad is the treasurer. So he's in charge of the finances, which is fantastic for me because I would really hate to try and keep on top of that. So he does that from England, which really helps me a lot. So he's a big part of the team and works from England.
How can people help you? Is it can they send things, or is it purely financial assistance? What is going to help Favela Phoenix stay sustainable at this point in time?
People can help in different ways, really. I mean, of course, coming on tours helps because 40% of the money from the tours goes straight into the school. Some people that come on tours do bring some supplies, some pens or workbooks or something. So, and also, financially, we do have links on the website where people can make one-off payments or where people can set up monthly payments, sponsoring the fundraising events that come around once a year. So there's a few ways that people help.
These young people that you're helping teach and transform their lives, what have they actually taught you and your team and in your life? How have they inspired you to continue?
I just seeing how popular it is as inspires me because I know it's the right thing, because there's a big demand for it. So And, like I mentioned, these people have a lot of drive and determination to learn, which inspires me to continue the project, because I know it's the right thing. It's what the community needs. So it's very easy for me to have the inspiration here, because it's all around. The people are very friendly. They're very thankful of what I'm doing. The project is popular. So yeah, I'm certainly inspired to continue the project.
And on the World Cup and the Olympics, which were multi-billion-dollar events put on, and at a time where it was politically very sensitive in Brazil. And how has that legacy played out, and how has that inspired the next generation of leaders in the country and young people coming through?
Yeah, I mean, actually, another attraction to me coming to Rio in 2013 was the World Cup and the Olympics coming here, because I knew it'd be an exciting time to live here, and I love these events, especially the World Cup, and I loved being here for it. I absolutely loved it, but I don't think they should have been held here, because it hasn't done the city any good. I mean, especially the Olympics. The state of Rio went bankrupt after the Olympics, which led to a lot of problems here in Rio, especially security problems, which led to a lot of violence, high levels of crime and violence, especially in the favelas since the Olympics has finished. So I don't think these events have left a positive, have left anything positive behind in Rio. I don't think these events should be held in countries where they don't already have the infrastructure in place. Because when they're having to spend billions suddenly on these things, it leads to so many problems. So seeing this afterwards, I don't think they should have happened here. As much as I enjoyed actually being here during the events, the lasting effect is nothing positive, actually. Especially for the people in the favelas, because they're the people in the favelas are the ones that really need this money to be spent in the right places on things like education, on health, basic sanitation, basic things that places need. And all this billions is being spent on these beautiful stadiums, which are now not being used at all, and the money should be put in somewhere much better that could really do so much good for not just the favelas, but the whole country, So yeah, it's been, living in the favelas and speaking to a lot of the people, I've seen the frustration of what these events have brought, which I completely understand from the favelas' point of view.
And that increase in violence really has did reach a tipping point a few months ago, with the military of Rio taking control of security and policing.
That's right, yeah.
How's that played out?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the lasting effects from the Olympics, because the state went bankrupt. They couldn't afford to pay the police or the pacifying police. So suddenly a lot of police disappeared in Rio, which the gangs took advantage of, So the gangs suddenly become very visual, and, they were coming out in places that they weren't normally coming to before, They were normally staying pretty hidden, but now they're not. The gangs are much more aggressive and coming out, and yeah, it's just led to a lot more confrontations between police and gang, and the violence has really spiked. Here in Rocinha we had a turf war in September because the police disappeared. So a rival gang took advantage of that and then took over Rocinha. With hundreds of them arrived one day in the cars, heavily armed, and the community became a war zone. For a few weeks, my school had to stay shut for 6 weeks. I couldn't do tours for 6 weeks. The place was just so dangerous. It really was a war zone. The army came in here twice. At one point, I walked down the main street of Rocinha and counted 12 tanks in Rocinha. And it was really crazy, you know. And since then, the violence has stayed. It's stayed like, you know, it's very continuous. It's happening all the time, unfortunately, you know, much more than it was before September when this rival gang took over. Which is sad to see, you know, because it's nobody likes this happening. Although, you know, people are used to it. You know, nobody likes this happening. You know, more people are being killed in this. You know, these young guys, normally the gang members, but these are young guys. You know, they're aged 16 to 22. Although they're gang members, you know, it's terrible that they're being killed at a young age. A lot of these guys don't want to be gang members. They're doing it because they're poorly educated. They can't find any other work because of lack of opportunities here. So they join a gang as a last resort. And yeah, it's sad because the violence has spiked here, you know, especially in Rocinha, which is frustrating for everyone, and it's sad to see. Yeah.
I'm sorry to. I'm very mindful of your time. Firstly, so we'll have a few more questions, Jody, and
Okay.
I know that's it's not a nice point to, you know, sort of finish on. But I wonder how your family, how do your family feel about you being so far away and you being where you are? Have they come visited a few times, and how's that connection still going?
Yeah, they have. My parents have been here twice, and they're actually coming again in July. My sister is coming from Canada in July, and that will be her first time here. They're happy that I'm here in Rio because they know, you know, what I went through in England with my ex-fiancée especially. They knew that I was very depressed at the time and that I needed something. I needed to change my life, and I needed to find happiness, which I really have found in Rio. You know, I'm very, very happy. So they're happy that I'm happy. I think since September and since the violence has spiked in the favela, I think they do worry more about me living in the favela since September. Because, you know, I do post news articles and I do post the occasional video of, you know, the sound of gunshots from my window, which gets my family a little bit worried. But they know that I'm happy. They know that, you know, I'm not in any immediate danger. They know that the guns don't get pointed at me, you know. So, I don't feel in danger here. And I think my family trust that I'm safe. Because I feel safe here. You know, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to go to any of these areas and I'm not going to get a stray bullet or anything like that. So I've reassured my family that, and I think they trust that. So they're happy that I'm here. They know that I'm helping the community a lot. They're very supportive of what I'm doing. You know, my parents and my sister, they're giving money monthly to my project. They're very, very supportive. And yeah, they're happy with what I'm doing. They're happy that I'm happy. Yeah.
And lastly, what's it like going back home to England, or if you call it home, but what was it like going back the first time and seeing your friends and having that direct contrast to where you live
That's
now?
right. Yeah, it's actually very strange going back. It's reverse culture shock, I believe it's called, because I do get a culture shock going back to England now because I'm so used to life in Brazil now and the lifestyle of Brazil. But actually, I love going back, especially the last time I went back, because I went back with my girlfriend, and it was her first trip outside of Brazil. And it was fantastic being with her because, of course, you know, like, everything's amazing to her, you know, the food, the architecture, the way people behave, all these little things. But I love going back because I forget how good the food is in England. The quality of food is fantastic there. It's great seeing friends and family again, of course. And, you know, even the little town that I'm from, when I lived there, it was always like the same thing every day. Nothing ever changed, and it was kind of boring life there in a small little town. Now when I go back once every 2 or 3 years, it always seems to have changed a lot. You know, I notice a lot of changes, and it's always great going back and I do enjoy it. I'm like a tourist in my own hometown again. You know, I do the touristy things, and I enjoy going back for sure. It's great. It's a reverse culture shock. I prefer the culture of Brazil. I'm very happy here. I love the lifestyle, but you know, I always like going back and seeing friends and family and tasting those English foods again, and you know, it's nice.
And Jody, this has been nice. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you. And how can people find you on the interwebs? What are the links on the social medias that people should go and check out to find you?
The social media, you can find my project at Favela Phoenix, all one word. Our website is www.favelaphoenix.org, where you can find more information about the tours and the project. That's it. Yeah, look us up.
Mate, absolute pleasure, and I hope we get to cross paths again.
Pleasure talking to you. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Hey everyone, wherever you are in the world, thanks heaps for listening to Freo de Janeiro. You can visit the show website abidimam.com, ABIDIMAM, for all of the show goodies. You can subscribe, leave a review. I appreciate it very much. And until the next episode, keep smiling, keep scoring.